Everything that we have said about a community of love goes back to one core reality. If you ever are looking for a scripture reference about the relationship between God and people and the sacrifice of Jesus and the love of God, I commend to you the first letter of John. That is the condensed version of a love letter between God and God's people, mentioning in there that it is Jesus who is God's fullest expression of love. In particular, the 4th chapter of the first letter of John has these exquisite words, verses 10 through 12. Don't miss these. Make them a part of the mantra that runs through your mind on a day-by-day basis. Herein is love. Not that we loved, but that God first loved us and sent his Son to die for us. Therefore, beloved, we should love one another. So it all goes back to that primal love between God and humanity. This past Triduum, I had a lifelong ambition fulfilled, which was to preach the same Triduum messages to one community throughout the 3 days. I thank the cathedral for giving me that opportunity, and Dean Bolter. I said something during the Easter Vigil in my sermon that I had challenge about. I said, apropos of the Genesis reading, when God breathed into our nostrils the breath of life, God fell in love. And so I still believe that, but I think there's a way to say it with more theological heft. And that is to say that God, who is love itself, God whose very being is love, created us as objects of that love. And so God did indeed, in creating human beings, fall in love. And God's love is passionate and constant, and it's all about what Scripture tells us. The prophets tell us of God's anguished howl, God's cry when we are unfaithful and walk away, when we oppress the poor and needy, when we oppress and abuse one another. Through the words of the prophets, God howls. God howled for us when we were walking away. God howls for us when we break the bond between ourselves and God. And God found God's own love so passionate, so forthcoming, that God could not contain God's self and poured out God's love into the incarnate Word, who is Jesus, and in the power of the Spirit, who embraces and sustains and holds us. So I want to start with a quick story about love in action. The setting is in the Diocese of Lexington, where I served as assistant bishop about 3 or 4 assistant bishops ago in my life. And I was with a group who were at Barnes Mountain in Appalachia. The Diocese of Lexington has a magnificent ministry to Appalachia, especially through St. Timothy's Outreach Center, which has been displaying right outside these doors. And if you don't ever know anything else to do for a mission trip, go there. It's a comfortable place to reside. There's a full kitchen. There are projects to do. The countryside is beautiful. And the people are oh so desperate. There is rural poverty And it's not like urban poverty. It has about it a quality of isolation and separatedness. And it is an important part of our address to the conditions of poverty. You all know what poverty is. Our debate indicated that we have differing views about what to do about it, but no one in this room would say that we do not have a scriptural mandate to attend to the poor. Our only difference is how, by what means, using what vocabulary. You know that poverty is violence in slow motion. I'm going to say that again. Poverty is violence in slow motion. And so there we were on Barnes Mountain, a group of us as bishop in that diocese. I periodically came out to St. Timothy's Outreach Center to greet the visiting groups and to celebrate the Eucharist with them and lead them in theological reflection at the conclusion of each of their terms. And inevitably, what they said in theological reflection was, we learned to love these people. Isn't it interesting that when you invest in others, love follows? It isn't always that we love and then serve. In AA, we have a wonderful saying, which is, act your way into new ways of feeling. Act your way into new ways of feeling. Love, in fact, can be a product of our serving and not the precondition for it. So with that love backdrop, let me say that serving and loving is one of the great blessings of life. The more you do it, the more you are blessed. I would like the people who are icons of servanthood in our midst. Those are the deacons. The deacons who are icons, representatives of the servanthood of Christ. Would you all stand? Deacons, please stand. Thank you, deacons. Don't let us ever forget what our baptismal covenant calls us to do. And let me ask all those who are deacons in formation to please stand in our midst. These deacons are representatives of a most exciting moment in my life this past September, when I sat in the room at Christ Church Columbia, surrounded by a class, a new cohort of 6 deacon postulants, or about to be postulants, who entered formation for the diaconate under the new program. We have spent 2 years building a program that is accessible, flexible, customizable, but robust. Any of them will tell you it's plenty robust. Just because it isn't regimented doesn't mean it's easy. But here are people who are devoting their lives to studying and being formed for servant ministry in our midst. And we plan to welcome another 5 to 6 in this cohort coming in next September. And then in the pipeline coming through EBM and DOV are another 6 to 8. In other words, God is calling deacons to the Diocese of Maryland at the moment when we are getting clearer that mission and servanthood and the diaconate are all luminous representatives to us and reminders of what the church is called to do regardless. This has been one of the joyful gratifications of my ministry here with you, and I am so glad that before December of this year, when I turn the light off in my office for the last time, I will have admitted a second cohort to this program. And they are all splendid. They are faithful, hardworking people with a variety of gifts and skills, you can be proud. I also want to give a shout out to those persons who are undergoing formation for priesthood, particularly those who have made enormous sacrifices in their family life, in their finances with respect to job security, individuals who are boldly and bravely going off to seminary, basically burning a bridge behind them as they do so. And we owe them our support and our love, and we give thanks for the vocation that they too are pursuing. In my life here in the last 2.5 years, I have been enormously blessed to work with my colleague, Eugene Sutton, who is an exquisite colleague and superior, and to be blessed enormously by one who is not here with us by her own choice, the one who eschews public appearances, public attention, actually any kind of attention, public or private, and that is my very own assistant, Maisie Heil. You all know that Maisie has been thinking for some time about retiring. In the aftermath of her sister's death over a year ago, she and her surviving sister, who lives in Florida, realized that they needed one another. And Maisie has made the decision to retire and move to Florida, not in with her sister, she hastens to say. That would be the end of our relationship. But they will be neighbors and a support to each other going forward. Maisie's last day at work is June 8th, and I am bereft. And I will miss her terribly. If you have a chance, in a very gentle, non-intrusive way, to drop her an email or a note card or even just a quick handshake when you're in the building, don't tell her I suggested it, okay? Because she really, really hates it when people make a fuss over her. But you thought it up yourself, didn't you? To go by and say thank you to her. It's been a joy and a pleasure to do a number of things this year that probably don't reach your eye, which, you know, I don't mean that they have to reach your eye. It's been my pleasure to serve in the bishop's behalf as the person sitting on the board of Integrace. Integrace, formerly known as Episcopal Ministries to the Aging, is the operating company for several continuing care retirement communities that have an Episcopal affiliation. Many of the folks who are chaplains are here, and there are even some residents of our properties that are held by Integrace. It's been great to work with them as a board member for the last little while, and I'm going to be sad to have to hand that back to Bishop Sutton for him to exercise his responsibility with some other delegation. It's been a joy to work with the Ecumenical Leaders Group, which has been a group of support and political work and all kinds of mutual upbuilding with others, including especially our partners in the ELCA. You had Bishop Gohl with you last year, and Bishop Gohl was a keynoter at the small church meeting just 2 weeks ago. And then you met another of our ecumenical partners in a splendid sermon that my sister Bishop Luttrell Easterling offered as we began our time together here. It's been a joy to represent you and to be with you at the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C., where many Episcopalians gathered, particularly starting our morning at the Church of the Epiphany with one of our own, Glenna Huber, now the rector there, was amazing. I want to say to you that the small church movement that you just saw, I won't duplicate what they have told you, but that is a movement of power and grace that is gaining momentum and moving throughout the diocese and lifting up small churches, helping small churches to hold their heads high, to straighten their shoulders, and to remove from the term small church the preface justa. You know, justa. I'm just a small church. In the same way as it's been our work over the past year to not say justa in front of deacon. So there's no more justa, okay? Here's a red circle with the word justa and a diagonal red line through it. The small church group are talking about everything from how to collaborate with one another in important ways to how to get the word out about their vibrancy, how they thrive, what they do, and how to offer to one another a kind of continuous support. They are advocating for all sorts of things through Diocesan Council, into which they have an obligation to report, Diocesan Council having kind of summoned them into existence. And finally, friends, it's just my great joy to be part of visiting every Sunday in your churches. Don't let anyone tell you anything different. That is what makes a bishop's ministry possible. In the middle of the difficulties in a bishop's office, the people who are disappointed, who have no idea how it is you made the decision that they hate, who have no idea how you see the situation you're looking at intimately, for people who reasonably have doubt and questions about what goes on in a bishop's office, for all of that that is part of the traffic of a bishop's life, for all of the difficult decisions, all of the disappointments, all of the concerns that weigh heavy, getting together with you on a Sunday morning, praying, worshiping, singing, looking at your ministries, meeting with you, seeing evidence of your vibrancy, your health, your spirit, confirming your adults and young people, welcoming individuals through the sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, and enjoying fellowship with you. Every bishop who is telling you the truth will say, that's what makes the rest of it possible, is those Sunday mornings with you, with your people, preaching the word, celebrating the sacraments. Indeed, here's my theory. The church is not only a community of love called to be evermore a community of love, as our bishop has told us, but a church is also a laboratory of love. By which I mean it's where you get down to the real work of love. Love doesn't just happen. Love is a conscious attention to that first principle, that every day you put your feet on the floor, you are beloved. Every time you make a mistake, you are beloved. Every time you are not loving, you are nonetheless beloved. That belovedness is the state of life in which we dwell. And as we draw more and more attention in our own lives to this state, the more love flows out of us and through us. My term, laboratory, means that we practice the hard work of loving with each other. We practice loving in spite of difference. We practice loving in spite of a sense of alienation or antagonism. We practice loving in spite of hurt feelings or differing vocabularies or divergent viewpoints. We practice loving the people who we didn't choose to be with. In church, we are who we are. We didn't handpick one another. And honestly, in churches that do attempt to handpick the members, very soon there will be no members. Because people feel that when they come in. They feel that someone is putting up a yardstick to see if they're going to fit in and be accepted. And that's the last time you will ever see them. So the laboratory of love, which is our congregations, is the gift to us from a God whose love is passionate and deep and primal. And the means God chooses to teach us about love is not only the scriptures, not only the grace of our own lives, not only the wonders of God's beautiful creation, Not only the warmth of human affection to those we love and are comfortable with, but the love of God is made known to us in the laboratory where we do that hard work, that hard, beautiful work of learning to love in spite of. Fill in the blank. In spite of blank. I love you in spite of blank, in spite of blank, in spite of blank. So it's no accident that my first vocation was as a scientist. So I do think in terms of the laboratory where truth is unearthed and discovered. And so finally, a word about my plans. I turned 72 on the 29th of September. Like you, I am bound to obey the canons of the Episcopal Church, which means I will retire, not happily, but obediently. With the grace period of 3 months that we are given as bishops, I will retire on the 31st of December from serving as the Assistant Bishop of Maryland. And I will be sad to do that. But I want you to know I will continue to live here. My husband and I are Baltimore residents until they carry us out. And I expect to be here and there, as appropriate, with good boundaries, at diocesan events where it seems like someone in my position might be appropriately present. So we will not be strangers, but we will certainly close the end of a chapter together. I want to tell you that I'm in conversation with other dioceses because I'm not done being a bishop and having an active ministry. I'm healthy, I love what I do. I still believe that we who are ordained need to make our offering to the church for as long as we are able and feel led. And so I may well be waving to you from a diocesan border not far from here, and I'll be seeing you around. Meanwhile, back to the laboratory, because herein is love. Not that we loved, but that God first loved us. Amen.